Hi folks, and welcome to another First Impressions of a Clan Wars tank, courtesy of Beyond D, lending me his account for the day. This time we're looking at the IS-5, or as it's more commonly known, the Object 430. It's a Tier 8 Russian Premium Heavy, but yeah, again, I didn't know anything about this tank going into it, other than the fact it looks like an IS-3. We've got the pike nose, got a very similar turret to an IS-3. It's a Tier 8 Russian Heavy, just like the IS-3 or the IS-3A, so I just went into these games without knowing much about the tank and basically decided to play it just like I would an IS-3 or an IS-3A. Now I am going to do the history and I am going to do the armor profiles, and I'm going to be comparing it directly against the IS-3 and the IS-3A, but I'm going to leave all of that till the end of the video because once again this is one of these tanks where there's quite a lot of history. It gets a little bit complicated and some of you guys aren't interested in that, so but I will be doing the armor comparison, I will be doing the tank comparison, and I will talk about my first impressions towards the end of the video. But first of all, we're going to get into the gameplay. We are here on Malinovka. I'm top tier, tier 8 game, plenty of tier 8s on either side, and I'm going heal because I'm top tier heavy, want to play on the front lines, want to be aggressive, and yeah, on Malinovka you've got to take the hill, have to take the hill, especially on an encounter game. So we're moving up the hill. I've got a Cromwell B in support, and that's pretty much it. We've got a lot of other tanks who still have to leave spawn, but we can see that the acceleration is okay. We're doing roughly about 20 kilometers going uphill, slowing down to 15. So my first impressions were that it didn't seem to be any more mobile or any less mobile than the IS-3 or the IS-3A, which I play occasionally. But we have got a little bit of support. We're moving up the hill. Nice matchup, no arty. I've just realised, I didn't even realise when I was playing this game, or maybe I did, there was no arty. I'd forgotten there was no arty, but we're moving up. We're going to move up to the windmills so we can do maybe some side scraping. And yeah, the gun, you'll notice that it fires APC or standard, so heat as premium ammo. So the gun, when I was looking at its stats, although I can't bring them up because the UI is messed up, but I can't... I noticed that the gun was basically the same gun as is on the IS-3A. We move up, and beautiful shot into the side of a Firefly. This T-44 is sitting behind me, so I can't reverse well. But lots of enemy tanks on the hill. They're pushing very aggressively. Oh, snapshot on the side of an IS-3, and we miss, and now an Su-152 has appeared. So yeah, the gun handling feels very similar to maybe the IS-3 or the IS-3A. But we'll get into that later. Is it actually better or worse? We will find out. Blind shot into an IS-3. Not sure if that hit, not sure if it penned, but again, we've dominated, we've taken this corner, we're just aiming, looking for shots. And once again, ooh, nice fire on the Su-152. So there's kill number 1. We're up to about 1k damage. Still tanks appearing in front. Just looking for targets of opportunity. And once again, the snapshot misses. That was an easy snapshot, but the shot goes way to the left. Can we do it again? He's still got, no, I was going to say he still has 300 hit points, but we've got to make do with taking him out with just 139. So second kill of the game, and now I'm looking at this Firefly, I'm looking at the Chiri, I'm looking at a full health, or pretty much full health, WZ-111. 111 is the top tier tank of the enemy team, so I want to go and ambush this guy. I'm looking at the mini-map. I know there's a Borsig down here. Firefly's coming up, and gun depression seems to be a problem, but that would have been a problem in the ISs as well. But I've moved up, need to get into the dip to get myself safe from the Borsig, get myself safe from the IS-3, get a shot into the WZ. Rocks are behind me, so I'm safe from the tanks behind. We're just swinging around, reloading, and you can see I'm having some trouble getting my gun down because I didn't have the black reticule. But okay, 111 goes down. Oh, here's the Borsig, and aim. Not fully aimed, and snapshot goes into the dirt. So yeah, the gun handling is letting me down, and that's one of the things I noticed. It's one of these Russian guns, so sometimes every single shot, even it doesn't matter whether you're fully aimed or not, hits the target. And other games, unfortunately, you're going to be hitting dirt, or you're going to be missing snapshots. But we get a shot into the Borsig. He should have reloaded by now. IS-3 is moving up. I've got 2 tanks behind me, and I think, okay, they can handle it. Risk it, pop out, take out the Borsig, but the IS-3 behind me has just taken out our IS-3. I don't know why our IS is hanging back. The IS-3 had just fired, and I decide, oh no, I was going to flank, and then I realized the IS-3 is going to die to one shot, so Yeah, that's unfortunate, but I do know the IS-3 is fired, so we can pop out, get a shot into his lower glacis. Now he's a one-hit kill. I'm still on full health, but there's a Jagdpanther and a Heavy Tank 6 and a Skoda around here somewhere. So I'm a little bit worried about getting flanked, but I decided to fall out, miss my snapshot again because the black reticule was not there while I was playing the game. But we aim, we're going for, he's got his badly angled front plate, and that was a derp shot, really bad shot by me. He puts a shot into my lower glacis, and yeah, I'm messing up here. I'm playing really badly, get shot in the side by the Heavy Tank 6, but not too worried about him. Now we can shoot his front plate at an angle, bounce the Heavy Tank 6, turn around, reload. Yeah, frontal armor, pretty much IS-3 standards. Take out the Heavy Tank 6 with a shot that wasn't fully aimed. Okay, so a little bit of brawling there, but yeah, played that maybe a little bit worse than I could have. Again, it's amazing how important that little black reticule is when you're lining up shots. But we're on 5 kills. I'm the only one left on the hill. I know there's a Jagdpanther somewhere around here. A couple of TDs that are camping down in spawn. A couple of TDs, well, one TD that's camping on the H-line. But I move forward. Someone has spotted the Jagdpanther. Must be the AC-4 experimental. So again, moving up. And basically, it's enemy tanks, or enemy TDs, and a AMX 5100 left on the enemy team. So dangerous autoloader and a bunch of TDs, and they're all probably sitting down in C5. At least that's what I reckon. So not going to get any spots up here. I don't know what the view range is on this, but I imagine it's similar to the IS-3 or the IS-3A. I decide to be a little bit aggressive, move down, get spotted, fall back, and it's a good thing I fell back behind the rocks because there's a shot that just missed. So Jagdpanther is spotted. He's taking fire from the AC-4. I just get tracked by an AMX 5100. So now I know the AMX 5100 is sitting down at C5, and I've got no shots on this Jagdpanther. I'm being perma-tracked by the AMX, but I've got absolutely no shots on this Jagdpanther. He's below the ridgeline. My gun depression is not good enough. Our TDs, our Hellcat's starting to move forward, but our Borsig and our SU, I don't know what they're doing. I really don't know what they're doing. It's possible they're both AFK, or they're possible they're bots, or they're possible they're just sitting there waiting for everyone else to die before enemy tanks move into their view range, but could have really used some help from those guys. But in the meantime, our AC-4 is being an absolute boss, moves forward, spots the Scorpion, we get a shot in, and now it's just a matter of trying to support him because he's the one doing the spotting. Need to get shots into these guys. Not much to shoot out of the AMX 5100. Aim fully and get a shot in. So AMX 5100 is now a one-hit kill. We're on 4.2k damage. SU manages to snipe. Wow. I'm amazed that was even within render range of the SU. SU manages to snipe the AMX from spawn. I move forward. Jagdpanther's trying to side scrape, but I put a shot into him, run out of my regular AP. I'm now firing heat. I'm not sure when that happened, when I ran out of APCR. We bounced some tank. Oh, must have been the Dicker Max. Aim, firing heat, and yeah, nice shot in. So Hellcat takes out the Dicker Max. Now there's a 30. Not much to shoot at, but going for a blind shot. And not sure if it hit. We'll see. We'll see. If the 30 is respotted, we'll see if he's lost any hit points. Finally, our Borsig and SU decide to advance, so it turns out they weren't bots, they were just sitting there waiting for everyone to die. So I've dropped off radar, I decide to advance. But yeah, I like this tank. I played it just like I would an IS-3 or an IS-3A. Being a little bit passive because, you know, on 500 hit points, they are some dangerous TDs, or were some dangerous TDs that were left. The Scorpion could have rolled high when it killed me. There he is, speak of the devil. We take him out for kill number 6. The 30 could have run high, or rolled high, taken me out. AMX 5100 could have put a couple of shots into me, but looks like I did hit the blind shot in the 30 earlier on. Aim, put a shot in. We're now up to 5,200 damage. 6 kills, and someone else takes out the 30. So yeah, IS-5. I kind of enjoyed the tank. It was basically, I played it like an IS-3, and it seemed to work out okay. So just a first class on the tank, but I think when you see the XP totals, you'll realize that this is a tank that is played extremely well by a lot of very, very good players. It is a Clan Wars reward tank after all. First class, high caliber, top gun. We finished top on XP with 1455. Now, if that was an IS-3, I'd expect that maybe to be an ace. If that was an IS-3A, I'd expect that to be an ace. But in an IS-5, that's only good enough for a first class. 5.6k damage or 5.7k damage, so my blind shot did go in on either the Ferdy or an IS-3. 6 kills, wasn't too shabby, and I enjoyed the tank. I really did enjoy the tank. I thought it was a very, very similar gaming experience to maybe the IS-3 or the IS-3A. This is why you don't sit and spawn, guys. This is why you don't sit and spawn. Top tier Borsig, 0 shots, 0 damage, 0 kills, so don't sit and spawn, be a little bit more aggressive even if your tank doesn't have any HE or hit points or armor. But yeah, 23 shots fired, 19 hits. So yeah, a few snapshots missed, but you know, they do in the IS-3, they do in the IS-3A as well. 19 hits and 16 pens. So, you know, it's got a pretty good gun, pretty similar to the IS-3A. Happy with the damage, happy with the armor for the main part. Lower tier tanks are going to have problems penning this, just like an IS-3 or an IS-3A. 5 bounces, 3 pens. We damaged 11, destroyed 6. Didn't do very much assistance damage because I was pretty much shooting everything I was spotting myself. And yeah, even though it's a Clan Wars reward tank, technically it is a premium. It seems to get premium credit earning, so 133,000 credits earned there. So I think with these, you know, this consumable used, the ammo resupply was quite expensive. I think Beyond D must have been getting a Clan Wars reward credit bonus on his tank, because that's a heck of a lot of credits to earn considering that they were the expenses. But you can see it's a decent moneymaker. Even with these taken out, I probably still would have earned about 70,000-80,000 credits for that game. 2,181 XP overall. Yep, so I was enjoying the tank. Played it just like an IS-3, and it plays out pretty much like an IS-3, but that's not the whole story. So when we head into World of Tanks, where our Tanks GG I should say, we'll take a look at the IS-5, we'll take a look at the IS-3, and we'll take a look at the IS-3A. So we've got DPM, pretty much fits in between the IS-3 and the IS-3A. IS-3A has better DPM, slightly better DPM than the IS-3, but, you know, almost 2,000 DPM is pretty good. So it sits right in the middle between the premium tank and the regular tank in-game. The penetration is slightly worse than the IS-3, but exactly the same as the IS-3A. I said it was very, very similar gun. When I saw the stats afterwards, I reckon, oh, okay, it's the same gun. The IS-3A gets the advantage maybe with a rate of fire and the reload thanks to the autoloader mechanism, but it's got a better rate of fire and better reload slightly than the IS-3 does, so that's another bonus for the tank. You can see they're all 122mm caliber guns. You can see that the shell velocity, because it's firing APCR, is the same as the IS-3A, better than the IS-3, but the IS-3 is, you know, it's not too bad when it comes to shell velocity. Ammo capacity is slightly better by just 2 shells, but it could make a difference. But the weapons handling, it comes right in the middle. It's got better aim time than either of the other 2 tanks, which is good, but the actual weapons handling is similar to worse than it is, or it's actually better than it is on the IS-3A, but worse than it is on the IS-3. So, you know, again, it's slightly better than the IS-3, slightly worse than the IS-3A. It fits right in the middle. It's a very, very competitive tank compared to the IS-3s. The gun elevation is the worst, but the gun depression is exactly the same. When it comes to this forward speed, the top speed, it has slightly faster top speed than the other 2 tanks, but at the same time, it's also got slightly slower reverse speed than the other 2 tanks, almost unnoticeable. You'll see that the horsepower to weight ratio is actually the best. It's got better horsepower to weight ratio than the IS-3 or the IS-3A, but on the other hand, it's got the worst ground resistance. So it's got the best horsepower to weight ratio, but it's got the worst ground resistance, which means driving the tank was a very, very similar experience to either driving the IS-3 or the IS-3A. The tank traverse is actually very, very similar to the IS-3A as well. IS has got it beaten, and then the armor is actually better than it is on either of the other 2 tanks. The hull armor is 120 on front, 120 on the sides, and 60 on the rear, which is better frontal armor than either of the IS-3s gets. It's got better side armor than either of the IS-3s gets, same rear armor. The turret armor, however, is slightly worse, so it may get much, much better hull armor, but it gets worse turret armor, so only 201 on front compared to 250 on the other 2, 129 on the sides compared to 172 on the other 2, and 90 on the rear compared to 100 on the other sides. But that's because the turret armor was slightly weakened to reduce the weight of the tank. We'll get into that in a moment. It gets 50 hit points more than the IS-3, but same hit points as the IS-3A. Anything else that's important here? Oh, it also gets slightly better view range. You can see that the view range is actually slightly better by 10 meters, 360 meters of view range compared to 350 on the IS-3. So overall, when we're looking at the stats, there are pluses, there are minuses, but there's nothing that stands out as this tank being much better than the others. There's nothing that stands out as being worse than the others. It's pretty much, if you were to get the IS-3, IS-3A, put them together, you'd probably end up with stats a little bit like the IS-5. So I think it's a very, very competitive tank, just as competitive as the IS-3 or the IS-3A is. So no major negatives and no major positives for the tank. I thought it was a pretty good tank. When it comes to the armor, I thought the armor was very, very good. As you could see, the lower glacis, just like the IS-3 or the IS-3A, is not the best. It can be penned. You've only got 185 effective armor on the lower glacis. The upper pike nose, yep, pretty good. You get up to 226, 222, which means that, again, even IS-3s or IS-3As shooting at you at close range, they're going to need an average to high RNG roll to get through these pike noses, and if the enemy tank is angled, then obviously the pike nose is a lot easier to pen, which is why I messed up one of my shots big time during that game. The turret armor, even though it's not quite as good as it is on the IS-3 or the IS-3A, is still extremely good. Look at this. Up to 500, 400, 300, 200, so again, it can be quite difficult. You're going to be bouncing pretty much most tanks with your turret frontally. One thing that I did discover during my gameplay is the roof of the turret is extremely weak and it can be overmatched. So it's only got 30 millimeters of armor, and that means that any gun that's 90 millimeters or higher caliber is going to be able to pen this roof as an auto pen. It's going to be an auto pen. The turrets or the cupolas, you've got this cupola over here to the right or to the left of the tank as we're playing the tank. That's only 66 millimeters up to 100. It can be a little bit tricky to hit. You've got these blind areas of these viewports on it, but the cupolas are very, very weak. So, if you can't get a roof shot, go for the cupolas. The cupola on the right side of the tank, or left as we're looking at it, is actually better armored, but it's also easier to hit. So you only need about 115 millimeters of pen to go through this. So I found that I was getting penned in the cupolas a lot more than I would expect if I was driving an IS-3 or an IS-3A. Maybe the cupolas are smaller on those tanks, but definitely the cupolas were a weak spot. I found myself being able to pen enemy IS-5s through the cupolas quite easily, and I found myself being penned through the cupola quite easily, even by lower tier tanks. So while the turret armor is great, the whole armor is great as long as you keep it pointed directly towards enemy tanks and don't angle. Yeah, those turrets or those cupolas can be easily penned. The side armor, amazingly good on this tank. You can see that by side scraping and angling, you can get the armor up to 400. You've got this, black hole spaced armor on the sides as well that will absorb shots. Your tracks will absorb shots. So the side armor, extremely good, just as long as you don't give them the pike nose to shoot at. The rear of the tank, again, weaker than it is on the IS-3 or the IS-3A, so 62 and 108 at the back of the tank. But I thought the armor was, technically it's better. It is better than the IS-3 or the IS-3A, but I found, as I say, the cupolas were easy to pen, or easier to pen than I imagined from the front. So let's talk about history, and if you're not interested in history, you're probably not watching by now, but if you're still watching and still with me, good to have you. Okay, so the history for the IS-5 is a little bit complicated, and it's a little bit complicated because of the name, IS-5. You see, there are some sources that say that this was never the IS-5, and there are other sources that say it was the IS-5, and one of those sources happens to be Wargaming. So in-game it's called the IS-5. But the problems occur, and the reason some sources say it was never the IS-5 is because of the name, the IS-5. You see, when this tank was developed in 1949, the IS already existed. The IS-2 existed. It's the Berlin Quartet tank. The IS-3 already existed. It's in-game. The IS-4 already existed as a Tier 10 in-game. The IS-5 isn't in-game, but the IS-5 already existed, which it was basically an IS-2 with a German Long 88. It was a concept tank, but it never made it beyond prototype. But there was already an IS-5 that existed around 1949. Also, after the IS-5, we had the IS-6, which was a premium tank, or is a premium tank in-game. The IS-6 and the IS-4 were both designed and developed around the same time, 1944. The IS-4 and the IS-6 went into trials together. They went into trials against each other, and in the end, even though both tanks passed their trials, the Russians decided to opt to produce the IS-4 over the IS-6 because the IS-4's armor was better. So the IS-6 remained a prototype and is only available as a premium tank in-game, but the IS-6 already existed. Before this tank, the Object 730, existed, the IS-7 was already being designed in 1949. So basically we had all 7 IS models either in existence or being designed or as prototypes before the first pen was put to paper to design this particular tank, the Object 730. So IS-1, or IS-2, IS-3, IS-4, IS-5, IS-6, and IS-7 all existed in some shape or form. Now, this is where the sources differ, because when this tank was designed in 1949, some sources say it was named the IS-5, which would make it a second IS-5. Other sources named it the IS-8 prototype. But what all sources do agree on is that it eventually became the IS-8 prototype. So some sources say it began life as an IS-5 variant. Other sources say it never was an IS-5, but it began life as an IS-8 prototype. But everyone agrees it was eventually the IS-8 prototype. So essentially what this was an attempt by the Russians to make a lighter IS-4. The IS-4, there were 250 of them built in 1946. It was a very heavy tank at 60 tons. They wanted to make it lighter and more mobile, so they needed to shave 10 tons off the weight of the tank. Now what they did was they took the flat armor from the front of the IS-4 and they basically turned it into a pike nose, took the flat lower glacis off the IS-4 again as part of the pike nose, and they saved some weight that way. They took the turret and they basically shaved off a few centimeters here, a few centimeters there, armor wise, while still maintaining the sloped and the rounding and the angling. They still kept it very, very effective, but they saved a lot of weight on cutting down on the turret armor in places, and they also made the tank much, much narrower. So the tank is much, much thinner than it is on the IS-4. So if we were to compare this to an IS-4 side by side, this is a much, much narrower tank. The final thing they did to shave off the 10 tons was they replaced the engine with a much smaller but just as powerful engine. The engine also happened to be lighter. So with all of those changes taking place, they ended up with this, the Object 730, which was 10 tons lighter. It was a 50-ton tank compared to the 60-ton tank the IS-4 was. So this tank passed its, or there were 10 models of this tank, or 10 of these tanks were built. They went into trials and they passed those trials incredibly well. It was a very, very, very successful prototype. Problem was, at that time, Russia were trying to move away from heavy tanks and move on to maybe medium tanks, which is why this is considered maybe a heavy tank, medium tank hybrid. So the tank never made it into production. But it passed the trials, so it was used as a test bed for the IS-8, and this is where all the sources agree, because everyone agrees that the Object 730 was the prototype IS-8. The IS-8 was a tank we had in game, but that tank never existed because it was this tank and it was just a prototype. So that happened in 1951. In 1952, the IS-8 was not developed. There were some changes made to the tank, and this tank, the Object 730, became the IS-9 prototype. So not only did it have the distinction of being the IS-8 prototype, with a few minor tweaks and upgrades, it became the IS-9 prototype. But that tank was never put into development either, and in 1952 this tank then became the testbed for the IS-10. So this became the IS-10 prototype. So not only, again, according to some sources, was it the IS-5 prototype, it was also the IS-8 prototype, it was also the IS-9 prototype, and finally it became the IS-10 prototype in 1952. However, Joseph Stalin then died, and as a result the IS tank was renamed. They didn't want to, well, there was a lot of political confusion in Russia, let's just say. They didn't want to name another tank after Joseph Stalin, so they renamed the IS-10 to the T-10. So essentially, this is the prototype IS-8, it is the prototype IS-9, and it is the prototype T-10. So there we go. Very confusing history, but I like to think that basically the IS-5 is not this tank. The IS-5 is an IS-2 with a German gun. I like to think mainly chronologically speaking, because the IS-1 to the IS-7 already existed, that this was, as most sources say, or every source agrees on, the prototype for the IS-8, but maybe when it was added in-game, the IS-8 also existed in-game, so maybe Wargaming called it the IS-5 simply to avoid confusion. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, interesting tank, and there we go with the history. I don't really have much else to say. This is the T10 prototype, or the IS-8 prototype, or if you want to keep things simple, just call it the IS-5 like Wargaming did. Very, very strong tank, enjoyed my games in it, and it felt very, very comfortable. Even though I knew nothing about the tank when I went into these games, it felt really, really comfortable, and that's pretty much testament as to how similar it is to the IS-3 or the IS-3A. No better, no worse than those tanks, and yeah, I was very, very impressed. It's probably the strongest and most fun Clan Wars reward tank I played that day. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.